In the early 70s, a group of students at C.W. Baker High School in Baldwinsville, New York, set out to build a radio station that would create a unique broadcasting experience, not only for them, but for a multitude of generations to come. Nearly a half-century later, it's time to hear firsthand from those who went behind the mic, telling the stories of how this station changed their lives, both in the studio and beyond, as we celebrate 50 years of broadcasting excellence on WBXL 90.5 FM. This is The Buzz Goes Gold.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of The Buzz Goes Gold. I'm your host, Jordan Hayes, class of 2007, and here we have another one of the founding members of the great station, Larry Eiss. Please introduce yourself and tell me what year you graduated.
Hey, so good to be with you, Jordan. I appreciate you doing this. I think it's a great endeavor. I'm excited to listen to all the different episodes. So yes, as you've said, I'm Larry Eiss, and I'm class of 76. And Mark Humpfrey, David Castle, and I were kind of the initial three people who got this wonderful radio station off the ground and moving. And it's been a lot of years, so my memory isn't as clear perhaps as some of the people who have been on more recently, but we were there when there was nothing but a crazy shaped room that we were tucked in the side of a hallway.
Yeah, so we already had Mark Humpfrey on. He's going to be the second episode after Judy Riom Philip Chuck, but let's start at the beginning. How did your friendship with Mark Humpfrey come about, and where was your what did you have to contribute in terms of your reason for starting WBXL?
Right. So yeah, Mark and I were friends for a number of years. We went to the same church, and we knew each other well. We visited one another at our homes. I spent a lot of time at Mark's place, and we had this, he had this upstairs kind of room over his dad's garage. And we used to go up in there and mess around. And then we're always doing something with electronics. Probably the biggest thing I remember that I really enjoyed was we had these old FM radios, and we would get the ones that had the best tuners and the most sensitivity. And we would sit with headphones on, and we'd turn the dial super, super slowly, looking for FM stations from as far away as possible. And what we really loved was when we had sporadic skip. And this is caused by sun cycles and stuff. And so once we had a station, I think it was from Texas, and we were in New York, of course, in central New York. And so the skip was really cool. So we used to play around with that a lot. I remember we built our own telephone using a Morse code key and a couple of old spray can tops with speakers mounted in them, held onto our heads by coat hangers. So we did a lot of that kind of stuff. And then we got involved together at school when we were in high school. We were in radio club. We were in the audio visual club. This is back in the days when video was brand new. And
I can imagine, yes.
We had these big video recorders. They were about probably 2 feet wide, and they were reel-to-reel recorders with 2-inch tape. And they were quite the thing. So anyway, so we were in audio visual, so we did a lot of that stuff together. Radio club came about, and we were engaged with like ham radio and that kind of stuff a bit. And then we were building stuff in our bedrooms and just having a great time.
Yes. So can you remember the first thing that you said to Mark about starting this? I want to get more into your contribution to starting the station.
Right.
What was your pitch? Maybe better way to ask this. Tell us what your pitch was, or let me just rephrase this. Was Mark really the leader in all this, and you were more of a follower, or did you have as equal contribution.
Right. Yeah. So that's an insightful question, Jordan, and you're absolutely right on the money with that. Mark absolutely was the driving force behind this, and it would not exist if it wasn't for him. And one of the reasons for that is his engineering skill. Even back in those days, he was a good enough engineer in high school that he took an old transmitter that I believe came out of originally a TV station and modified it in such a way that it would be workable as the first transmitter for the WBXL FM station at 10 watts.
Yeah,
And
as far as I know, sorry to interrupt, it came from WAE. From the story he told me, I thought it came from Fayetteville Manlius, and they a station that they were doing, and they ended up getting it from WAER at Syracuse University.
right, that could very well be. Yeah, that sounds familiar, actually. Yeah, like I said, my memory is a little fuzzy after 50 years. But anyway, so he was the driving force for sure. So I was helping with whatever things I could do. I was never the engineer that he was. But one of the things where I got involved was when we built the first antenna for the station. Mark designed this antenna based on some material that we found or had or were able to purchase. I can't remember. And my dad was really good at fabricating and that kind of thing. And so we built the antenna elements and got those put together for the very first antenna that we put up. And, I helped by, connecting things together and helping set things up and doing some of the more manual types of tasks at the beginning. And then, of course, I was on air a bit and always enjoyed that.
Right, we're going to get into the on-air bit in just a minute. Is this something that you do today, the mechanical type of stuff, or not? Because it sounds
yeah. So my career kind of took a little bit of a different turn. I had set up a small radio station in my house as a kid and played around with that, and I kind of thought I might go in that direction. But what it ended up was I started working for Radio Shack, and I ended up getting into just electronics generally. And then later, when computers started coming out, that just fascinated me. And so I spent my whole career in computer software. So really where I've spent my time has been more like that. These days now I have a podcast and an online ministry and that kind of thing. And so as you can see here in this video that we're doing together, this microphone hanging over my face. I have a setup for that stuff. So I still touch a little bit on the edges of broadcast.
We're going to get into that later in the episode, but let's go back to your on-air high school experience. When were you on, and what was your favorite thing to do as a jock or as a? Yeah.
So in those early days, we were each on just whenever we were able to be on. And so it was always during school hours for me. I didn't do any after hours stuff. I'm not even sure if we were doing it that early. But I enjoyed playing music and I enjoyed all that stuff. But my very favorite thing to do, believe it or not, was read the news. I loved to do that because I was always a strong reader, and I was able to learn how to read sort of one line or half a sentence ahead of what I was saying. And so I always felt really happy that I was able to do it, and it sounded good, and I enjoyed doing that.
Okay, you're the first one. No, actually, you're the second guest that I've had who's been interested or enthusiastic in news, or at least journalism. Allie Mincher Williams will have in a future episode actually studied to become a journalist. She actually got her undergraduate degree in journalism in college. So
Right.
It's quite interesting. Any of the headlines that stick out to you, maybe just one one or two that you remember the most vividly?
Yeah, not after these many years. I really don't remember what any of it was, but I just remember I loved reading it. And then of course we were doing PSAs all the time, and so and I enjoyed those as well.
Yes, absolutely. We got to talk about the station tech and the music. What were we using to play the music? I can guess, but I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so there were a couple of things that we had, and for the music specifically, it was usually vinyl of some type. We had two turntables that were pretty nice actually, and so we were spinning vinyl. We had some stuff on tape, and I don't remember the format of that. I remember we had cart machines for PSAs, but I don't remember what we did for the other taped stuff.
Okay. You're not the only person who's mentioned cart machines, and I learned about that after graduating from BXL.
Yeah,
I was on WJP's. I was on WJPZ 2 years after graduation, and I know what they are, but I don't know exactly how they work or exactly how you played with them.
Well, the only thing I can equate it to is something else you may not be familiar with, and that's an 8-track tape. These things were like a little tape cartridge that you would slide into a machine, and they were only a few seconds long, usually up to maybe 30 seconds or so. And you could just pop them in, hit the button, it would play the little bit, and then stop, and you'd pick up from there and go back to microphone or whatever it was you were doing. And then you'd pop it out, and the next time you needed a different one, you'd pop that in. But they were pre-recorded little segments. Typically, they were used for public service announcements or ID at the top of the hour or things like that.
Okay, and I say this to all my guests because it is just amazing to me, and I'm obviously living in a different era. I'm living in a different era than you particularly are. Now we use computers and websites.
Right.
I've actually developed my own station using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and whatnot. And
That's
I got
really
it on.
cool.
It uses YouTube now, and I know mostly even the AM/FM stations today, they use automation software. It's a computer program that automates the entire rotation and playlist. Right. You don't need a jock. You don't need a DJ to sit in front of the console 24/7 like you used to back then.
Yeah.
Because back then, if you didn't have anybody running the board, then the station would be off the air.
Correct.
I would think. And so what about, let's talk about Al Jenner.
Sure.
Did you have him? You must have had him in class and as an advisor.
When I was there, it wasn't yet a for credit class, so there wasn't really a teacher. But Al was what I would call the sponsor, and he and Mark went to the Board of Education, to get the approval and that kind of thing, and they worked through all the FCC stuff. And Al was supervising us, but we really didn't have a class, so we just were getting in there, on whenever we were able. A lot of times we were there and Al wasn't around at all because he was teaching or doing something else. And so, my interaction with him was a lot less than Mark's because he and Mark, needed to work together on the things they were doing. But I love the guy. I mean, and I'm sure everybody who you're going to talk to is going to say the same thing. He was a very nice guy. He cared about us, and he worked really hard to make this happen. And I think, without Al, it wouldn't exist. He and Mark together were the required two.
I find that interesting. What I've heard other people say is pretty much the same thing that you're saying. And even though I didn't have him as a teacher, obviously, based on my reports that I've heard from people who did have him as a teacher, I've gotten the impression that he sounds like a very big deal in the start of not only getting WBXL off the ground, but teaching future generations of BXLers to not just love what they do, but do it well. From what I've heard, what I've heard Judy say, for example, on the first episode, he had very unconventional teaching methods. When you took his class, you learned more than just how to do something on the air, but you also learn important life lessons as well. How to build your confidence and how to improve your public speaking skills and whatnot. And what I heard from was Andrea Scala Hutchinson, he wanted to make sure that you pronounce the letter W correctly.
Yeah, diction is a big deal on there, and he was really good with that. You know, I think too that because he came, you know, he had been doing radio, he really added perspective that none of us as students were able to provide. We didn't know these things. I mean, you know, if anybody was close to it, probably Mark was closer, but you know, because he had been engaged with another local radio station over the years, because I think his dad maybe did some engineering for this station, but I'm not sure. But he had been involved in that. It was a Christian radio station called WMHR, and I think that that he and his dad were somehow involved with it. But so anyway, Mark was closer to the whole, you know, real side of it than any of us. But Al, you know, he was working in the business, and I mean, when he spoke, when he said something, we took that to heart because we knew that, hey, this guy is a professional DJ. He knows what he's doing, and we could count on it being right. And so we learned a lot from him for sure.
I'm glad. I mean, let me just get to this for a minute. The fact that the advisor had experience in the radio and the broadcasting industry, I mean, that's nothing to be taken for granted. And I say this because the successors that came after Al, Peter Hunn, who I had an advisor, was the last person. I don't know if it continues today. We've had some faculty advisors and teachers after Al Jenner who have not. They were not professionals in the radio or media industry. They were just They were teachers, but they were not. They did not have that real world experience background. I don't really know about the current advisor. But during my junior and senior years, we didn't have the luxury of having a teacher who had that radio background, but we were able to keep it going based on our experience learning what Peter Hunn taught us the year before. And the fact that this was a student-run radio station, but we had that advice, we had the advisory and the support from a faculty member. I find that to be an interesting juxtaposition. Also, because WJPZ is also a student-run radio station, but they're really doing it on their own. They have a faculty advisor who they ask for advice when needed, but they're really doing well just doing it on their own.
Now, where is JPZ located?
Oh, that's at Syracuse.
Right. Yes. So there was a student-run station. I want to say it was in Central Square. I could be wrong about that.
Yes,
Mark might know.
That sounds.
And we went there, and when we were working to set up BXL, we went to this other station, CSQ maybe it was called. In fact,
that's what Mark told me.
Yeah, so we went there and we visited them and we watched what they were doing and we talked about their equipment and we, looked at their setup and stuff. And that gave us a, kind of a leg up and some new ideas for what we wanted to do. And I had forgotten that until just now. So that was really instrumental too, because, being able to actually see it in operation helped us a lot.
Yep. And funny story about CSQ, they, once they went off the air, that allowed WJPZ, which was currently at AM and carrier current, that allowed WJPZ to get their FM license
Oh, wow.
to go to the FM dial. So everything comes full circle. You're
Yeah.
not the only guest that I'm going to mention both call letters for both stations for. And because there is a Syracuse connection. As you can see, I'm wearing my orange today as a proud alum of Syracuse University. But even though I bleed orange, I also bleed red, red and black, red, black, and white just as much. I still live in Baldwinsville. Do you know I still live in Baldwinsville?
Is that right? That's
Yes.
great.
I've been here since 30 years ago. Yep, I've been here for the past 30 years.
That's
Went
great.
Obviously went to school through the system, graduated in 2007. So besides Mark, any other names that you want to give a shout out to, or at least have some relevance in your life?
Yeah. So there was a third guy in our group, David Castle, who I haven't seen or heard from since. In fact, I've not been able to locate where he is. But then and he was also very helpful at the beginning. We were all kind of a band of friends that were doing this stuff. Then also in my last year or so, Phil Nagy, who I think a lot of your listeners are going to know his name, became involved, and so I knew Phil briefly, and he was a great guy, did a lot of wonderful stuff for the station, and has been a real force for the success of BXL.
I mean, the funny thing is, we're recording this on Monday, April 1st. No fooling. I actually had Phil on earlier today before you.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Good.
And
I'm really looking forward to listening to these, Jordan.
Yep, I can imagine. Even, are you talking about all, and you're probably mentioning all decades, not just from the 70s and not just from the 70s and 80s. Yep, I know Phil. He's a good guy. I graduated with his daughter Liz, actually.
Gotcha.
In 2007, and we have a mutual. Liz and I have a mutual friend. Had a mutual friend who was actually GM of She was actually one of the co-GMs of WBXL during our senior year.
Awesome.
And so anyway, we know each other through that way. Let's go into after graduation. You mentioned a little bit earlier, but you're in the field of IT, or what are you doing?
Yeah, I had so as I mentioned earlier, I had started working for Radio Shack right out of high school, and I spent several years there, eventually managing a store. And then when my later years at Radio Shack, they had come out with this new thing called the TRS-80 microcomputer, and and I just got taken by that thing. I'd stay after the store closed at 9:00 at night. I would stay, and I would run these programs they had for learning how to program in BASIC. And computer programming just stole my mind. And it was like, this is what I want to do. And so I began to do that. The first thing I did was I looked through the yellow pages to see if there were any computer companies, and there were very few. And one of them was over in Fayetteville, and it was a consulting firm that was writing code for people. And so I called them up and I said, look, I'm willing to come and work for you really cheap. I said, you can even pay me under the table if you want. I just want to work someplace and learn. And so I went there and I started learning how to program even more in different languages. And then from that, ended up in some computer stores and one thing and another, and then had my own consulting firm for a number of years. Ultimately, that led to a job at a computer software firm in Los Angeles. So I moved out there, and then that company got bought by a company on Long Island. So I moved back to New York, and I did a lot of traveling around the world with that, and had moved from programming into more managing teams of programmers and managing tech support people and managing product development overall, that kind of thing. And I spent 30 something years in that industry, and I retired back in 2015 from the computer software industry. Most of what I did, though, was in software for large businesses that sits in the back office that nobody knows anything about, and so it was like business intelligence software and analysis stuff and all kinds of things like that. And that's really where my career went, out of what started as an interest in electronics with BXL and some of the other early stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and I forgot to ask Phil this because we were talking about other stuff. That sounds like an interesting career path, because I'm in the field of IT and I love computers as well. And I actually started my own tech support business back in 2022. And
Haystar, right?
Yeah, you follow. Well, I'm on my email. Yes, the signature.
I paid attention.
The signature of my email. And I've also learned how to code. So I developed my own. I've developed my own internet radio station that I had to learn how to. I had to learn how to code by hand in JavaScript. It wasn't easy. As a fellow programmer, you understand the intricacies of getting certain things of code to work, and when it fails, it's not easy. It's a nightmare to try to troubleshoot and debug where something went wrong or how to fix something. So I know it's not as easy. I'll put the link in the chat if you want to. I'll put the link in the chat if you want to take a look at it. I'm always looking for new listeners to come on the station. And as a matter of fact, what I'd like to start doing either in the next year or whenever I have this set up, I'd love to have people, subsets of WBXL alumni, come on the station and either do one of these two things. Be a guest on a live show that I do a Friday night live show at 8 p.m. Or I know I'd love to have them be guests, or better yet, I'd love to have subsets of WBXL alumni come in for a week at a time and actually get to host their own shows. So wow. if that's something that you may be interested in doing, or you have colleagues who may be interested in doing that, let me know and I'll get it all set up. But it was not easy to code that thing, and I'll put the link in the chat later on, and I'll let you if you have, what, the Chrome. Do you know that, for example, in Chrome you can actually right click the page that you're in, and you can actually look at you go in the console and you can look at
the code.
The code. So I'd love to have you evaluate my station later on at the time. Any lessons that you've learned that still carry with you today?
I think, we touched on this a little bit earlier, Jordan, but I think speaking clearly and reading carefully have stood me in good stead over the years. As I mentioned to you, I traveled around the world doing software related things, but a lot of that had to do with speaking at conferences, and doing training sessions and those kinds of things. I ended up preaching in churches. It helped me there. I mean, anywhere when you have to speak in front of people, you don't want to be doing all the time. You want to, you want to be able to say what you say in a way that's clear and understandable for folks, and you want to feel and sound relaxed rather than nervous. And so all of those things, I think the genesis of all of that understanding really came from the time at BXL. And it was something I worked hard to do and to learn. And it's a contribution that Al Jenner for sure helped make. And then also just, my own study and interaction with other people who were doing this kind of stuff. It was good. And so that has been valuable to me over my life.
I'm glad. And this station has taught many things. For me, for example, I've learned about commitment and adaptability, mainly because when I was on the station, I got to interview a lot of people, mostly from outside in the community. So I would actually talk with them and I would bring them in. And there were some occasions where I planned a guest to come in to do my show, but unfortunately, for one reason or another, they had to bail out. Sometimes I can remember this very vividly. Some guests let me know ahead of time, but others did not. So I remember sitting in the studio getting ready to do my show, anticipating a guest would come in, and when they didn't come in, I felt sad, and I felt a little bit not necessarily. Yes, I was sad, and I was a little bit frustrated. There were even some times when I was devastated at myself because I planned everything perfectly, or so I thought, and I was really looking forward to talking with whichever guest I had. But then I had to learn how to think on my feet and adapt because the show must go on, and I just carried on. But that was a valuable lesson that I didn't quite learn the importance of until years later. And even to this day, thinking about this, it was a good skill to learn the hard way, because that applies to later in life, not just doing radio, but anything, even in your personal life. Plans change, and you just got to roll instead of kicking yourself in the foot. You just got to roll with the best and make what you have in your hands work. So
absolutely, then that can be a hard lesson. I can imagine that, when people cancel like that, you feel a little hurt, because it's, even though it's not personal, it feels personal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap this up. I have another guest coming on in about a few minutes. Reflecting on this, looking back, is there any advice that you would like to give to the younger generation about your experience, or anybody who's looking to start from the bottom up? So particularly anybody who wants to start either a new business or do something unique and innovative, what would you want to say to them?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question, Jordan. And I think one of the things that I think I've taken away from this whole process was that, when I came into it, I was just a kid in school. I didn't know anything. I didn't really have plans or ideas or any of that. I just knew I enjoyed a certain thing. And I just would say, when you find something like that really resonates within you, that you just enjoy in your heart, pursue it and keep doing it. I mean, these things are what lead to the kinds of careers that are enjoyable and remunerate you well, and benefit others, because each of us is made in a different way, and some of us are good at one thing and some are good at another. and the things that we tend toward, that we have a proclivity for, that we're drawn to, those are great indicators of things that we want to foster and continue to grow. So and the second piece of that is this, and I'll be brief, I know we need to end, is that, when you have an idea, even if it's kind of a big idea and it seems far off and hard to reach, just keep taking the next steps. I mean, this is what I think maybe more than anything, I felt like we did when we were getting BXL off the ground. Our initial thinking started out, with this idea, but how do you accomplish that? I mean, we had no clue. We'd never done this stuff before. And so we just did one thing and then another thing, and we asked for permission to do this, and we asked for permission to do that. And we petitioned folks, and we went out and found equipment, and we did all these different things until suddenly it sort of reached this point where, we need a faculty advisor. Let's get with somebody. And Mark knew Al already somehow. And so, he was able to talk to him, and Al agreed to do it. And, these things all took time and energy, but each little step was important. And if we had just said, oh, this is too hard, we're giving up, or, we don't know how to do that, so I guess we have to forget it and walk away, then it wouldn't exist. And so just keep pressing on toward the things that interest you is what I would say.
Thank you. And I would thank you and Mark and Al, and who was the other?
David Castle.
David. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, not just...
I lost your audio. There you go.
I just want to thank you, not just from the bottom of my heart, but from the numerous generations of WBXLers that came after you, including me, and those who came before and after me. Final question here. Have you listened to the station now? What do you think? What are your thoughts of the station now, almost 50 years later?
That's a hard one for me because I haven't been back in the area in a long time. The last time I heard it was probably 10 or 15 years ago, and I was impressed. I thought it sounded really great. It was so rewarding to be driving around in my car listening to this station. But I haven't been up there in a long time, so I really haven't heard it lately at all. I'm sure it's just wonderful. I can't imagine how much.
Things have
how much better it is
since then. They moved the studios. Did you hear? They moved the studios from the second floor now down to where the library is.
Oh, wow. Yeah, nice.
And they obviously upgraded their equipment. They're not using they're not using records or reel-to-reel or cart machines anymore.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being on, and we look forward to talking with more. I look forward to having you take a look at my station. I have and possibly being on it one of these days. I've included the link to my station in the private chat if that's something.
Yeah, I see it there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Jordan, thank you so much for organizing this and putting it together. I can't tell you how wonderful that feels to me, and I'm really looking forward to listening to all the other people. It's enjoyable and great, and I'm just honored to be a part of it. Thanks so much for including me.
Thanks again for listening to The Buzz Goes Gold, a podcast celebrating 50 years of broadcasting excellence on WBXL 90.5 FM. This podcast is produced exclusively by the alumni of WBXL, with hosting duties by yours truly, Jordan Hayes, class of 07, and the intro voiced by Rick DiUlio. Many special thanks go out to WJPZ alumnus John Jag Gay, class of 2002, for the inspiration behind this podcast and his helpful tips and advice for making it go.